Welcome to the video lecture on small business and the United States economy. First, we're going to get started. We need to look at how is small business defined. And this definition really falls under, when we talk about IRS and tax purposes, Small Business Administration is going to define a small business as a business that employs less than 500 employees. Now, most people are going to say 500 employees, that's going to be a big business. And so from Small Business Administration standpoint, they're going to define it less than 500 employees. Now, Small Business Administration also looks at something they call micro businesses. And a micro business is a business that takes less than $35,000 to start up and is going to have less than 5 employees. And so for a lot of us, our businesses is going to fall under that micro business category. We look at the different statistics. In 2009, there were 5.7 million small businesses in the United States. That made up 99.7% of employer firms. And so of the businesses that had employees, 99.7% of them were considered small businesses. Now, if we even take a deeper dive into that statistic, we'll find that firms with less than 20 employees are going to make up 89% of those businesses. So this really shows that majority of the businesses in the United States are going to be in that 20 employees or less situation. Now, on top of that, we're going to say in 2010 that we had 22.1 million non-employer firms. And so that's going to be people, sole proprietors, no employees. We're going to say that there's 22.1 million of those. Those numbers are pulled up off of what people are submitting on their tax returns. And so when we look at the gross domestic product, 40% of the private non-farm GDP in 2008 was from small businesses, compared to 48% in 2002. And so when we look at how the economy, we had a downturn, how did the economy affect business? It really kind of affect business across the board equally. The GDP is still being represented by about the same percentage that it was when before the economy went bad. Job growth. When we look at jobs created between 1993 and 2009. So in 1993, the economy, that's when it started to rebuild and grow. And then we also have some time of contraction in this time frame. But we're looking at 65% of new jobs are going to be created from small businesses. Share of employment. Firms with less than 100 workers employ 35% of the workforce in private sector area. So we're not going to look at government jobs and public sector. This is just the private sector. With less than 500 workers, 49.4% of the private sector jobs are going to come from small businesses. And so what this is telling me is that even if you don't start your own business, it's going to be important for you to understand what a small business goes through, because you're looking at, you've got a 50% chance basically that you are going to be working for a small business. When we talk about innovation in trade, how much innovation is coming from small businesses? Per employee, they are going to produce 16 times 5 more patents than large patenting firms. So, when they're developing patents and what they are working in, they are going to be more likely to develop and work in emerging technologies. When we look at exports, 97.8% of all U.S. exports are coming from small businesses. They are responsible for 33.7% of the goods exported in 2010. Also, small businesses comprise of almost 95% of all businesses that do both exporting and importing. And so in regards to the strength of our international trade, obviously small businesses are participating in that more so than they ever have in the past. We look at imports. Imports, they had $531 billion in goods in 2010. That is a 23.2% increase over 2009. So that's showing us that we are seeing a growth and a change in imports, which is telling us that we may be seeing some growth in our economy. That accounted for almost 32% of all the goods imported in 2010. We look at different trends. Unincorporated self-employed was 10.5 million in 2006. In 2011, it had dropped to 9.45 million. That number was the lowest in the last 25 years. Now, in the first quarter of 2012, so really just one quarter later, they have seen a jump from 9.45 million to 9.9 million. And so now we're seeing that it was up, it went down, and now we're trending back up, that more people are getting into the ownership of small businesses. Now let's look at what our survival rate is going to be. When we look at survival rates, 70% of small businesses last for more than 2 years. Where we see a big jump then is from that year 2 to year 5. Now that number goes down to 51%. 51% of small businesses are only going to survive 5 years. Then when we jump to 10 years, 34%. And then about a quarter of them, a little bit more than a quarter of them, are going to survive for more than 15 years. How they work: 51.6% of businesses are operated primarily out of someone's home. 23.8% of employer firms are operated out of someone's home. And so if you have employees, you're going to be less likely to operate from a home. Does not mean you can't. So even if you have employees, still 24% of those businesses are going to be operated out of their home. Sometimes mistakes people make is they expand, or they want to go into office space and have an office before they really need to. And all that of going into your own office, that creates issues in regards to revenue. It creates issues of liability, utilities, and so a lot of people start their business off from their home and then develop it and grow it outside of that. If you are a non-employer, meaning you are a sole proprietor, you're more likely to have your business run from your home. 62.9% of non-employer businesses are going to be run from the home. We talk about the demographics of the entrepreneur. Compared to the mid-1990s, entrepreneurs are trending to be more male and be more educated. There's also been a large growth in percentage of Latinos starting a business. In 2011, 543,000 new businesses were started each month. I think if you look at how these things have trended and how it has changed, you're going to see that this is probably going to go along with changes in our demographics as a society. There's been a large growth in percentage of Latinos starting a business, but we've also seen a large growth of Latinos in our overall demographic. And so we look at gender. In 2011, 62% of small business owners were male, 38% were female. In 1996, there was a difference between 56 and 44%. We talk about age breakdown. We're seeing a big shift. Is in 2011, the number of businesses owned by people 55 to 64 is 21%. In 1996, it was only 14%. You also see the age group of 20 to 34. That group had gone down from 35% to 29%. And so part of this is why are we seeing a larger jump at the 55 or higher? it goes back to, again, the trends in our demographics. That 55 to 65, that is that baby boom generation. There's more people in that generation. And so they have kind of left the 45 to 55 and have moved into the 55 to 64. People may be more likely to start a business at that age, and maybe more people are looking at maybe they didn't save enough money in retirement, or the realization that when the retirement age was originally set at 55, the thought process was maybe you'd live 5 or 10 years after that. I mean, it's common that people are living 20 productive years after retirement, and so they're looking for, quote unquote, something else to do. And so we're seeing more people at an older age level getting into running their own business. Education, it's pretty much across the board, stayed pretty steady to where it was in 1996. And basically what this is telling us is that doesn't matter which level of education you have, people are starting their own business. And so they may get additional training beyond that, but we're seeing that if you're going to want to start your own business, more than half of them are going to have some college involved in that process. When we talk about race or ethnicity breakdown, where we saw the big change is 77% of small business owners were white in 1996. That has dropped to 60%. And the big change, the big shift, came from directly is related to number of the percentage of Latino business owners, which went from 11% in 1996 up to 23%. And so we've seen a shift in that. And so, kind of as an overview, we look at small businesses. The number of small businesses is back on the rise. It's increasing. Banks are reporting that the number of business bankruptcies are declining. Money is still tight for small business owners. A larger percentage of older entrepreneurs are entering the marketplace. And how is that going to change businesses and maybe and who they're targeting towards? All the information that you've seen in this video lecture was collected from the Small Business Administration, Inc. Magazine Online, and the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council.